Hi and welcome to this video on Python. What we're going to do is we're going to look at data types and how they apply to the SQA curriculum. So first of all, we need to come up with what is a data type. Well, all information stored inside a computer is stored in something called binary. So programming languages have to have some way of knowing what that particular part of binary represents, and we do that with data types. So the main ones we're going to be looking at today are the string data type, which is used for storing text, the integer data type, which is used for storing whole numbers, and the real data type, which is used for storing numbers for decimal point. Now in Python, it's slightly different, so you'll find we'll be explaining a couple of things just as we go through and we do this. We're going to start off first of all by creating ourselves a couple of variables. A variable is just a named location, so the name is set by the programmer, that's you, and it's used to store information. So we can go ahead and we can set a couple of these ones. So if I just use these, so I'm going to use number A, and I'm going to store the value 12 in it. And I'm going to use number B, and I'm going to store the value 13. All right. So what we can do is if we run the program just now, nothing happens because we've not told it to do anything, just to store numbers. But actually inside the computer, if I go to view and turn on variables, we can actually see there are variables here, and this information is now stored in the computer's memory. And if I again type num and then C and I make that equal to 42, you'll notice it's not in the computer's memory yet, and that's because I've not ran the program. So as soon as I run this program, we get A, B, and C, and the information is now stored inside the computer's memory. But we can access that information by using the variable name. So the print command is used to display information on the screen, and if I print out num A, then what it will actually do is when I run it, it'll go ahead and it will say the number 12. Okay, so number A is an integer. That is a number without a decimal point. However, we can go ahead and we can give numbers decimal points. So if I, for example, put in 0.6 for number B, so 13.6, and then I change it and I run it now. Okay, then notice it puts a 13.6, but also notice the value in the computer's memory has changed. This is called a real number. That is a number with a decimal point. We can also go ahead and store other things. For example, pupil name. And if I go ahead and this time I'm going to make this a string, we can just put in the name Bob. And now what we can do is we can get it to display Bob by putting in pupil name. So if we run it now, we'll see we have now stored. It displays the word Bob. Pupil name is Bob, and now in the computer's memory, we no longer have num_c because we've taken that out of our code, and we've replaced it with pupil name and Bob. So these are the variable names. This is called a string. Now, what we want to do is be able to assign variables with data. So we've already seen how to do some of that. We use the equal sign, but it is possible in Python to use keyboard input. So we're going to have a wee look at how we do that. So first of all, we're going to print a question. So we're going to print, hello, what is your name? Okay, and then we're going to get name, and we're going to assign in the input. Now, what this input command does is as follows. Okay, so we hit run. So it goes through the steps, and it's going to go, hello, what is your name? And you'll see we've got this flashing line. This is our cursor, and we can go ahead and we can say Bob. Now it's no longer displaying Bob because we haven't asked it to, but we can go ahead and we can get it to display that by taking a new line. And again, we're going to do print, and we're just going to say hello, comma, name. And now we run it. Hello, what is your name? And I put Tom. And it's going to say hello, Tom. Now you can see we still have a variable called pupil name, which is assigned at line 4. We still have the number at A, the number B, which are assigned at line 1 and 2. And now we have the variable Tom, which was assigned at step 7. Okay, I don't really like how that looks, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify my code to put in something to help the user out. What I'm going to do is, inside this input, I'm going to get it to display the character greater than. And now when I run it, it says, what is your name? And you can see now it's more obvious that we can put in the person's name. And it'll just say, hello, then name the person. So in this case, Joan. In the National 5 course, there are 2 other types that we've got of data. One is a Boolean. A Boolean is a Boolean is a value which is either true or false. So for example, test so we can have it either true or we can have it false. It is Scotland, so false. Okay, and again, these can be displayed out. You could print true and false, but actually what you tend to use Booleans for is making choices, and we'll make some choices later on with these Boolean variables. The last data type that the SQE has is something called a character, and a character is just a single letter. So for example, initial equals I. Okay, a single letter, one letter all on its own. This would be a character. And you can think of a string being made up of lots of characters. So we've covered, in this video, we've covered assignment of integers, real numbers, strings, characters, and Boolean data types. Okay, remember the difference between an integer and a real number is a Boolean data type. Is the difference between an integer and a real number is a real number has a decimal point. So how can we go about casting the information, so changing it from one type to the next? Well, let's have a look at some numbers. If I do A equals 1 and I make B equal to A, then when I print when I print B, I should get the number 1. So I run the script, and you can see that A equals 1, and then B is assigned to the value 1, and when I print it out, I get a 1. But I can change from an integer to a real number. Now, in Python, we use float. It's short for floating point. Okay, and this is when we cast it to a real number. Now notice that because it's a real number, because we've got float here, it becomes 1.0, and we can see that in the computer's memory where that's stored as 1.0. Okay, we can also go the other way. So if I have C and I make this 13.3 and I make D equal...
Can the janitors contact the office?
And I make D equal to C, and I go ahead and I print out D, then the following happens. So what's going to happen is we've got C, and we're going to take just the integer component as we change it using the int function. Okay. So when I run it now, we should get 1.0 and 13. Okay, so it's just the integer component. Now I can prove that by making it something like this. So if I run this, we're only returning the integer component, which is 13. So what it's actually doing is it's just taking everything before the decimal point and it's storing that. Everything after the decimal point doesn't matter. So this is how we can cast from integer to a real number and from a real number to an integer. But there is one other thing we can do, and what we can do is we can cast things as a string, and we do that by using str. So I can give you an example of that. If I do e equals str a, okay, and I get it to print e, and I now run it, then you'll see that the e has quote marks around it. Okay. And this is cast into a string. What else can we do with this casting? Well, we can make use of this with the input function. So if I just go down here and take a wee blank line, and I want it to print, please enter a number, num a equals input So this little program is going to get number A and number B, and it's then going to add it together. So we should be able to go answer equals num A plus num B. Print sum of those numbers is answer. Okay, so please enter a number. I'm going to put in number 2 and the number 6. And it says the sum of those numbers is 26. Well, how the sum of those numbers is, how is that possible? Because 2 plus 6 should be 8, not 26. Well, what happened? Well, if you look at the computer's memory, what we've got is we've got the number 2, but it's not a number because it's got quotes around it. So we've got the character 2 and the character 6. And when we try to add these together, we end up with them being concatenated. So the order is 2, 6. So what I need to do is I need to be able to cast those strings as an integer. And I do that by simply putting the int function around the input. So now when I run it, I ask for the numbers, and I put the same numbers in, 2 and 6, and it says the sum of those numbers is 8. And you can see now, stored inside the computer's memory, they don't have quote marks around them. Okay. We can also cast them to a float by just simply changing that to a float and to a float. And when I run it now, please enter a number, so 12.5, please enter another number, 2.5. That gives us sum of those numbers is 15.0. And again, you can see all that information displayed here in the computer's variables. So casting is a process of changing one data type to the next, and we can use a float to cast a number to a real number, int to cast it to an integer, or str to cast things as a string. Thanks for listening.